Hello and welcome to Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy. I'm your host Leo, and today we are talking about Boy Kills World. But before we go ahead and get into that, I'll go ahead and give you guys quick updates. Now, personally, for me, not much has happened in the way of updates because I have to pre-record this episode because a lot of stuff is about to happen over the time. In fact, the next episode, fingers crossed, will also be pre-recorded. It will either be recorded here before I leave, or it'll be recorded there after I get there. But regardless, by the time you are hearing this, I should have made the big move. The long 10-hour drive of pain and misery. But yes. So that's part of the reason why I am doing this episode here. And that is because, well, I watched Boy Kills World recently and I needed something to talk about. Honestly, figuring out episodes at this exact moment, not easy. It's a bit of a pain. I mean, of course, in the future, after the ball gets rolling, it'll be books and still more movies and maybe TV series if the streaming sites aren't complete assholes. You know, the standard thing. But yes, it's a time. But with that said, we can go ahead and dive right into the episode of Boy Kills World. So I saw this movie's trailer, I believe, just online. It was, I think, just thrown at me. And I thought it looked fun and interesting. It has the voice of Bob from Bob's Burgers doing the internal monologue of Bill Skarsgård's character, also known as Boy. So the basic plot of the movie is that this boy, his family was killed when he was young, and he has been training ever since then to kill the woman who killed his family, specifically his sister. He has a very strong attachment to his sister. Now, he trains up. Now, he was deafened and his tongue was cut out, so he can't speak. And he's taken the voice from the announcer from him and his sister's favorite video game. And that has become his internal voice because he no longer remembers what his voice is. But yeah, continuing the basic plot, he's on a murder quest of revenge, moving headlong, and that's the basic plot, honestly. Because the actual story is a lot more interesting and fun and funny, and there are some obvious issues with the film, but overall I think they can be overlooked because they are not too bad. But yes, so the film opens up with the main character, Boy, and his family standing and being shot by I think they're like called the Vanderbilts or something like that. Yeah, so his family's killed, and then we cut to him buried in the ground, breathing through a tube, and eating stink bugs because he's in training. He's being trained by a man called the Shaman, who it is not exactly specified his reasoning, at least not at this point. But he is training Boy to become a killing machine, to, succeed in his goals. We're later told that he had known Boy's mother and that she was part of a resistance, and that's why she was killed. Because the Vanderbilts have a yearly celebration, I guess you can call it, called the Culling. And it's where their political enemies are rounded up and summarily executed. That's pretty much it. So it's kind of like a much simpler Hunger Games, where instead of like just picking out a couple random people, it's very specific people, and they're just shot by President Snow. Just keep it simple. Though it does supposedly up in complexity, and there are other issues surrounding the culling as well. But yeah, so Boy grows up, and he starts to hallucinate his sister. Like, there was actually a really cool transition where young Boy and grown-up Boy like look at each other and then like kind of shake hands and turn around, and then it transitions to adult Boy taking over, which I thought was a very fun transition. it's a good way to kind of end the long training montage that we were subject to. But him and the shaman go into town, I guess, to get supplies, I guess. Boy sees a girl who gives him a flower, and she starts talking about how she loves the culling and whatnot. And Boy is immediately disgusted by this because, his family was murdered during the culling, and he lost his voice and hearing. He's able to read lips pretty well, but he does run into some issues later in the film. But anywho, it turns out that day is the culling, and people are being rounded up for the execution. But they're just being gathered. They're not being brought to a specific place to just be shot. Something's different this time. Boy decides that enough is enough, because one of the people that married into the Vanderbilts is a little bit trigger happy and ends up shooting someone in the crowd, which starts a riot, and most of the people around there get killed. So they have to round up like the 6 people that remain, even though their target was 12, and just do with what they have. But yeah, Boy decides that enough is enough. No more blood shall be spilled. At least no more innocent blood shall be spilled. And he runs off to kill the Vanderbilts. And he hops in a trunk with a dead guy to follow them wherever they're going. And it's this like factory area. And he starts going on his little rampage after he gets caught. And he runs into a guy named Basho, who gives him a shotgun, which at first doesn't shoot. But he's like, hey, I gave you a gun and it technically worked. So we should team up and work together. You do the killing and I'll do cart stuff. And so he does cart stuff, while Boy goes around clearing out the rest of the warehouse. They team up. Basho takes him back to the Resistance headquarters, because it turns out he's part of the Resistance, only to find one other guy there. And the only person left is a guy named Benny. Now, Benny is the only person that Boy can't understand, because he can't quite see how his lips are moving, because he has a full beard and I guess supposedly kind of mumbles his words. So Boy just has to kind of try to interpret what the hell he's talking about. And he'll occasionally, Boy will occasionally spout out definitions to words, because he read a dictionary primarily. That's what he read. But yeah, so after this, they start to develop their plan. They're going to go to the Vanderbilt mansion. It's Vanderkoy's, sorry. They'll go to the Vanderkoy mansion, and he just kind of has to roll with whatever the plan was, because he couldn't fully understand what the plan was. And he's like, oh yeah, so we're just sneaking in and we're going to kill them that way. But then he's disguised as a cook, and he just has to kind of pretend to be a chef, even though he's, he has no clue what he's doing. So he ends up walking around the mansion grating cheese until he comes across macarons, which his illusory sister says, hey, you should eat them because they're macarons. Yeah, hell yeah. But yeah, so he goes through, and we're kind of introduced to June 27. I don't know why she's called June 27, but she has this, I guess you could call it a crop top coat thing, and a biker helmet with LED words and stuff on the visor. It's pretty cool design at the very least. And yeah, Boy goes through the mansion. He sees who he thinks is the woman that killed his mother and decapitates her. But then it turns out that it was a ploy, and that most everyone at this table was actors, no actual Vanderkoys, save for one of the sons, or one of the brothers. The brother that does all the staging and whatnot for these events, and June 27, and then the grandmother, who's just there because it's easier to just have her there. Yeah, so after this, he's captured after he gets into the fight with June 27 and dehelmets her. He gets knocked over a banister and onto the ground. He's knocked out, and then he wakes up tied to a chair, where he is then interrogated. Now, he gets a bit of a discussion with the brother, the theatrical brother, who pretty much is like, hey, I don't really care which way this goes, honestly, and I'm just kind of curious to see how far you're willing to go. So he ends up slipping Boy a saw thing, and then he's taken to the culling. So the culling is now kind of a sponsored event, because I guess they were running a bit low on funds. And some of the people that we see were taken for the culling include the girl who was like one of the biggest supporters of the culling. And it's sponsored by a cereal mascot, and all of the murders for the culling are being carried out by said cereal mascot. But they also toted out the woman who has supposedly been hiding away in a bunker because she's become extremely paranoid. Her name is Hilda. And she's, letting that paranoia show. But the culling begins, and Boy slowly works to, cut himself free. He does, and he starts fighting the people, but he ends up getting kind of overpowered and held down, and the goat mascot is coming over with a big heavy hammer, but it turns out that the goat is Basho, and then Benny comes out of a bush, and they start killing everyone. Basho ends up getting shot, and so does Benny. Benny ends up dying, and Basho is bleeding out, but he tags along with Boy for long enough before he just kind of keels over and dies. Boy comes across the theatrical brother and kills him. He accepts his fate, and then Boy takes the elevator down to the bunker. In the bunker, in the elevator ride down, he notices, or he's taunted by Hilda, and he flashes up the drawing that him and his sister had made, and then he's let through. June 27 meets him at the elevator and says that she'll see you now, and so they go to see the mother. And then the big twist of the film is revealed, that Boy is actually Hilda's son, and he has actually been manipulated by the shaman his entire life to believe that Hilda is not his mother, and that his mother and sister were killed. And this was done through a mixture of abuse and drugging him with hallucinogenics. And then when Hilda's not able to see any kind of signs of affection from Boy, partially due to the fact that he is in extreme shock and also cannot speak, she orders June 29 to kill Boy, but Boy then flashes his hand up at her. At first I thought that it was like, a grab my hand kind of thing. But no, it was a reference to a conversation him and his sister had, which was genuine, or at least he was hoping it was genuine. That being that they were standing at the statue of their mother, and she was flipping off the statue, but with all of her fingers, so that she was doing it 5 times as much as a normal middle finger. So there's that, and then she would also do it with both her hands. But this inspires June 27, also known as Mia, to kill her mother and flee with her brother. And they go into a big murder spree, killing all the guards as they go, and they get to the elevator and are about to escape with some minor wounds when the elevator is called back down to the bunker. They come out, find everyone that was remaining dead, and the shaman there. Boy tries to have the shaman, just, hey, leave it alone. You got what you wanted. They're all dead. And he's like, not all of them. They're still her. But Boy refuses to kill her because that was the one person he still wished was alive and was very happy to find out was still alive. Then it ends up in a big fight between all 3 of them. She and June, or Mia, ends up grievously wounded, and so does Boy. But Boy is eventually able to overpower the shaman and kill him. Mia and Boy limp out of the bunker, severely wounded. But in the post-credits scene, we are shown that they are still alive and chilling in a dilapidated house, eating some terrible cereal. But yes, that is that. It's a pretty interesting movie. The violence is very over the top. Supposedly they took the game where his name is H. John Benjamin, the voice of Bob from Bob's Burgers. They took that game and made it a real game that you can play, and supposedly that game is getting a spin-off TV series for some reason. And one of the characters in that game is June 27. So that's, like, as best as I can tell, why she's called that. Maybe even then, the name is still weird. But this film evokes a lot of, like, kind of, like, a specific feeling in my mind. And there's a couple of reasons why. So it has the feeling of those kind of pseudo 80s inspired films. So there's Turbo Kid that came out. It also is similar to Hardcore Henry. You know, it has that feel of experimental, you know, we want to play around with a certain type of film, and that's what we're doing. So it has the feeling of Turbo Kid, it has the feeling of Turbo Kid, it has the feeling of Kung Fury, it has the feeling of kind of weird things like that. And there's a bit of an explanation for that, because, for example, the Kung Fury feeling is partially due to the fact that the person who wrote this film, at least one of the people that wrote the film, actually wrote Kung Fury 2, which is the sequel to Kung Fury that's supposed to come out sometime soonish. He's also the writer of Alan Wake 2, Quantum Break, and did some additional writing for Sleeping Dogs. So there is some precedent there. It's very interesting, really. And yeah, so it has that kind of feel to it, but at the same time, because of that feeling, it also probably comes from the fact that the plot is relatively simple. For example, the twist that June 27 is actually his sister, I pegged immediately. So she actually arrives fairly early on in the film when they're rounding up the people for the culling, and she has to help, you know, stamp down the riot that has happened. She's the one that kills most of those people. She supposedly has been searching for him. Like, she never stopped searching, even though she was told that he died and that there was no hope. She believed he was still alive. And yeah, I pegged almost instantly that that's his sister. Even though the film does try its damnedest after her first introduction to convince you that that's not the case, because it shows her, you know, dead after being shot, shows her dead hanging in a tree because for some reason after they were shot summarily, they were hung up in a tree. And then that's where he was saved, after he was also tortured, supposedly. So that's where a lot of the threads kind of come apart in the whole, like, this is how it happened narrative, because, yeah, that's not how it happened. So it does at least try to give you some hints that, you know, not all is what it seems, because, you know, if they were all shot, why wasn't he shot? If he was shot, why was he then tortured afterwards? If he was then tortured afterwards, why was he then hung? You know, it does give you little breadcrumbs. So the actual reasoning behind the shaman's actions is his family was actually killed by Boy. See, his mother on the culling was trying to get him to kill the prisoners. He ended up killing the shaman's wife and daughter, but not the shaman. In fact, when he was given full reign of the gun, he had kind of lost control of it and kind of shot randomly around. Afterwards, he fled into the woods and was caught by the shaman, who tried to kill him. But then the shaman, in the middle of trying to kill Boy, decided to take a different route. He decided the extreme gaslighting and manipulation route. He's the one that destroyed Boy's ears and cut out his tongue. He's the one who, manipulated him to the point of wanting to kill his mother. and whatnot. Even though from other flashbacks we are shown that both Mia and Boy hated their mother anyway. And we're also shown that things aren't quite working out within the family. At least two people were very willing to change sides. The theatrical brother and the one that married into it both decide at the end, well, before they're killed, to help Boy. The one that married into the family, he's willing to, go with them and get them into the mansion to kill Hilda. And the theatrical one is, helped Boy escape during the culling and also refused to call in his guards to, stamp out the problem. But yeah, the style is pretty fun. There's a lot of fun comedic moments. Like, you see what Boy interprets from what Benny says when the plans and whatnot are going through, and him just kind of going along with it for the most part, and his going along with the interpretation working out very well is also very funny, because it's shown that the only thing that they had him do was cause a distraction, and he did that perfectly. While the other two went around and were, hiding in disguises. They disguised themselves as guards. Then they disguised themselves as the mascot characters. But the problem is, around this time, Benny takes over the explanation, and, it becomes a fantastical, weird thing going on. It is extremely gory and violent. That's about that. The descriptions from the promotional material was that this is like a live-action Looney Tunes, and there's some small elements of that to it, I think, but I wouldn't really say that that's the case, While, yeah, there's some slightly cartoony and funny, fantastical elements, it's mostly just graphically violent. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to say, like, oh yeah, no, that is a perfect description. No, it's mostly just graphically violent and a bit gross. Let's see, what else is there? It's unlikely that it'll get a sequel, because it doesn't really need a sequel unless they decide to have the further adventures of Boy and Mia, or maybe we'll actually learn what his name is. But it's sadly unlikely, because the film itself didn't do terribly well in theaters, and I don't know how it's done, like, in rentals or, DVD release. But, yeah, it's fine. It doesn't need a sequel. Not everything needs sequels. I would like to see more films kind of like it, though I'm kind of getting a little bit annoyed with the whole hyper-violence in films. Like, it works in some cases, especially when it's like the subversion kind. Like Violent Night, pretty good. But, it's getting a little bit tiresome just seeing ultra-violence go blah on the screen for most of the film. Because a lot of movies are hyping up the hyper-violence that they have, and it's just getting a little bit exhausting to watch. Do I recommend this film? Yeah, sure. Give it a watch. It's worth at least a watch. It's pretty good. Don't watch it if you can't stomach, extreme gore, decapitations, etc. But otherwise, yeah, it's not bad. Updates for other things like the challenge. At least as of recording this, I have recorded the episode for the challenge early because, well, a lot of stuff's happening for the adventure. So I need to kind of start pivoting my focus towards that. So I pre-recording this, pre-recording that, and then I might pre-record one more episode either like shortly after this or after I've made the move. I have yet to decide. But I'll probably do all the editing on these episodes after I've made the move. Just to, one, give me something to do, and just to take my mind off stuff. But yes, with that said, though, thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys enjoyed this, feel free to give it a like, comment, and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. YouTube episodes might end up having delays put on them, just because it might become difficult to actually, make the YouTube version. I tried making the YouTube version for the Tron episode on my laptop, and it didn't get like halfway through like rendering the video before I gave up and decided to remake it on my desktop and just get it done that way. So trying to make the YouTube version out in the field is going to be pretty much an impossibility. So there might end up being delays on the YouTube version every so often. I might, if I go with the pre-record and pre-upload method, should work out fine, but it's going to be a bit weird. Anywho, yes, YouTube, do the YouTube things, and rate and review on any podcast catcher of your choice. But with that said, once again, thank you guys so much for watching. I will talk to you guys next week. Goodbye.